Yeah, my dear students, today in this chapter, the Delhi Sultans, we will learn about how this Delhi Sultanate got expanded. In chapter 2, we have seen that regions like Kaveri Delta became the center of large kingdoms. I don't know if you have noticed or you have seen, it is mentioned about a kingdom with Delhi as its capital. That was because Delhi became an important city only in the 12th century. Take a look in your textbook, table 1, the map which is shown. Delhi first became the capital of kingdom under Tomar Rajputs, who were defeated in the middle of 12th century by the Chauhans, also referred to as Chahamanas of Ajmer. They were referred as Chahamanans of Ajmer. And it was under the Tomaras and Chauhans that Delhi became an important commercial center. Many rich Jaina merchants lived in the city and constructed many temples. Coins minted here. The coins were manufactured to exchange in order to purchase goods. And these coins were called as Delhiwal, had a wide circulation. Now the transformation of Delhi into a capital that controlled vast areas of subcontinent started with the foundation of Delhi Sultanate in the beginning of the 13th century. Take a look at this table 1, that is map in your textbook. Again, and identify the 5 dynasties that together made the Delhi Sultanate. Check, it is shown on the map in table 1, the 5 dynasties where they made together a Delhi Sultanate. Delhi Sultan built many cities in the area that we now know as Delhi. Look at map 1 and locate Delhi, Khunna, Siri and Jahanpana. These were the various cities built within that Sultanate. And if you see how these dynasties were there, now about the Rajput dynasties, Rajputs who were ruling, that is Tomaras. Tomaras were in the early 12th century, that is 1165. Then Anangapala. Anangapala, they were from 1130 to 1145. Chauhans were 1165 to 1192. Then were this Prithviraj Chauhan. Prithviraj Chauhan was in the era 1175 to 1192. Then was the early Turkish rulers. They were also here. That is Kutbuddin Aybak, then Shamsuddin, then was the Rajia, then Ghiyasuddin Balban. So like this, many were there, many rulers were there. Now if you go to see about the finding out about the Delhi Sultans, if you go to the literature, there were many inscriptions, coins and architectural monuments. All these were providing information. Authors of Tawarik were learned men. They were the secretaries and administrators, poets and courtiers who both recounted events and advised rulers on governance, emphasizing the importance of just rule. So these were the writers, they were the poets and courtiers. They were working as a secretaries and administrators to the rulers, and they have noted down all these things. And just rule means justice. In that Delhi Sultanate, it was known as one more like a circle of justice. Fakri Mudambi wrote in the 13th century, a king cannot survive without soldiers, and soldiers cannot live without salaries. Salaries come from the revenue collected from peasants, from farmers. But peasants can pay revenue only when they are prosperous and happy. The farmers can pay the revenue only when there is a good crop, a good harvest, only when they were happy. And this is what this Fakri Mudabir have written. This happens when the king promotes justice and honest governance. When king promotes justice and honest governance, then only all this can happen. This is what was written by Fakri Mudambir, one of the learned administrator, a poet, a courtier, we can say. He was there in during the time of Delhi Sultanate, and what he has written is still there as an inscription in the history. Tawarik. So the authors who have written this inscription, they has to live in Delhi and hardly ever in the villages. They were not in the villages, and they were hardly has to go in the villages, and these people has to live in the city, Delhi. They often wrote their histories. They often, very often, they were writing the historical happenings, the history, what was happening. They were noting down, especially for sultans, in hope of rich rewards. They were not paid, but they were writing this in hope of rich rewards. They were writing what was happened, whatever was going on, history, the historical events of the sultans in the past, what happened, then where they fought the battle, with whom they fought the battle, all this they were noting down as an inscription, hoping for the reward. They were not paid, but they had a wish, they hope, the sultan, the emperor, or the king will reward us if we show this what was happened and if we note down as an inscription. So these authors advise the rulers, saying that we need to keep a record based on birthright and gender distinctions. The ideas were not shared by everybody. They said we need to keep record based on birthright and gender distinctions. In the year 1236, that is after the Sultan Iltutmish, his daughter, that is Razia, became the Sultan. Mihaz-i-Siraj recognized that she was more able and qualified than all her brothers, but he was not comfortable at having a queen as a ruler. Nobles of the court, Sultan court, so they were also not happy, and they said, no, we don't want her as a queen, and she was removed from the throne in the year 1240. And later on, in the early 13th century, the control of Delhi Sultan really went beyond heavily fortified towns occupied by garrison, arms, cannons. All the towns were with the military support. The Sultan seldom controlled the hinterland of the cities and were therefore dependent upon trade, tribute, or plunder for supplies. So their ruling went into the hinterlands. They were depending on the trade, the produce of from the farmers. They were depending on that, and to protect all this, they used the military force. Controlling garrison towns in distance like Bengal and Sindh from Delhi was extremely difficult for them. Rebellion were fighting the opponents, the opposite, they were fighting with them. There were war, even bad weather could snap fragile communication routes. If there was a heavy rainfall or maybe due to various type of bad weathers, they could not communicate, some routes were blocked, and all these things. The state was also challenged by Mongol invention from Afghanistan. There were some intruders entered from Afghanistan. So they need to have their protection from them. The soldiers from the Sultanate need to fight with them too. And by the governors who rebelled, the various towns were given under the governorship, and all these governors also started to rebel. And now the Sultan's weakness, they saw the Sultan's weakness, and the Sultanate barely survived these challenges. Its expansion occurred during the reign of Ghiyasuddin Balban, Auladdin Khalji, and Muhammad Tulug. So during this, the time of these sultans, during their time of ruling, the expansion was done. The first set of campaign along the internal frontier of the Sultanate aimed at consolidating the hinterlands of the garrison towns. During this campaign, forests were cleared in the Ganga Yamuna area. Hunters, gatherers, and pastoralists expelled from the habitat. During this garrison or during the expansion of their frontier, the Sultanate, what this Sultan did, they have cleared hunter-gatherers, the earlier settlers who were at the river bank of Ganga Yamuna. They have drive away the farmers who were rearing cattle, herds of cattle, and they were taking them on the plains of the river Ganga Yamuna for the pastures, because it was a grazing land for them. They have removed them, they have expelled them from the habitat. Dhanan gatle, they have removed them because they wanted to expand their sultanate. Now these lands were given to the peasants, farmers. These lands were given to the farmers, and the agriculture was encouraged. They have removed all these Adivasis who are living in the jungle. They were like hunters and gatherers. They had to go in the jungle, hunt and eat. They were hunters and gatherers. They have removed them. They have removed. Now we have dangas. We have those dangas rearing sheep or goats. They have herds of animals. These people have removed them. And the land was given to the farmers. They have given to do the agriculture activity, to grow crops. They have encouraged it. And that made them to trade. That was like income for them. New fortresses and towns were established to protect trade routes and to promote regional trade. So new fortresses and forts were built, small on the route wherever this trade was going on. All this grain they has to load it on the bullock carts or the horse carts, or wherever they were transporting this from one sultanate garrison town to another garrison town under the protection of army. So new forts were built. Everywhere they put the Delhi Sultan soldiers to protect. The second expansion occurred along the external frontier, that is of the Sultanate. Military expedition into southern India. Southern India started during the reign of Auladdin Khalji. Military expansion in the southern part of the India was done during the reign of Auladdin Khalji. They have culminated with Muhammad Tulug. In their campaign, Sultanate armies captured elephants, horses and slaves and carried away precious metals like gold, copper. By the end of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign, that is around 150 years, he ruled, Muhammad Tughlaq. And at the end of his ruling as a ruler, after ruling 150 years, somewhat humble beginnings, the army of the Delhi Sultanate had marched across a large part of the subcontinent of India. They had defeated rival armies and sieged cities. The Sultanate collected taxes from the farmers. Then they dispensed justice in its reign. But how complete and effective was its control over such a vast territory? We need to know. If you see their map, the campaign map, you see the campaign map. From Delhi, the Delhi Sultanate expanded to Gujarat, Chittoor, Ranthambore. Then they went to Devagiri. From there, they went to Bengal side, Kara. And from there, they went to the southern peninsula of India. They went to Kerala, Madurai. You can see in this map. They went on expanding. They went on expanding. You can see how various fortresses were built. Delhi Sultan built many mosques in the cities all over the subcontinent. This demonstrates their claims to be protectors of Islam and Muslim. Many mosques also helped to create the sense of a community of believers who shared a belief system and a code of conduct. It was necessary to reinforce this idea of community because Muslim came from a variety of background. So that is how the Sultanate expanded the religion also. They have built many mosques. Now if you take a closer look, the administration and consolidation under the Khaljis and Tuluks, you can understand how it was. The consolidation of kingdom as vast as a Delhi Sultanate needed reliable governors, the consolidation of a kingdom as vast as Delhi Sultanate needed reliable governors and administrators. Rather than appointing aristocrats and landed chieftains as governors, what early sultans did, instead of appointing learned chieftains as governors or aristocrats, they were thinking for the consolidation of the kingdom, to expand it. And these people wanted now reliable governors to govern their kingdom. That is why they, especially the Delhi Sultan, that is Iltutmish, favored their special slaves purchased for military service. They have purchased special slaves for the military service. So they took into consideration these slaves, and they have given them all this thing, and they were called as bandagan. Bandagan in Persian language, this especially purchased slaves for the military purpose, were called as bandagan in Persian language. And they were carefully trained to man some of the most important political offices in the kingdom. They were trained to man some of the most important political importance, having political importance offices in the kingdom. Who? Sultanate have trained who? These specially purchased slaves for the military purpose. They were totally dependent upon their master, the Sultan, who trust and rely upon them. All these slaves which were purchased especially for the military purpose, they were trained. And these people were specially dependent on their master, that is Sultan. And they were having trust, and they were relying upon them. The Khaljis and Tuluks continued to use bandagan and also raise people of humble birth who were often their clients to high political position. They were appointed as generals and governors. However, this is also introduced as an element of political instability. Now, these slaves specially purchased for the military purpose, and these slaves and the clients were loyal to their masters and patrons. Masters means the sultans, but not to their heirs. Not to the heirs means the sultan, the ruler. They were loyal to the masters, but not to the heirs. New sultans had their own servants. As a result, the accession of a new monarchy, or often they saw there was a conflict between the old and the new these masters. The patronage of these humble people by the Delhi sultans also shocked many elites, and the authors of the Persian Tawarikh criticized the Delhi sultans The authors who were writing this inscription, which was called in the Persian language Tawarik, most of these authors, they started criticizing the Delhi sultans for appointing the low and base-born high offices were given in the hands of these specially acquired, specially brought slaves for the military purpose, keeping aside all the learned governors, keeping aside all the specially knowledge acquired, their own people. They started criticizing the sultans, all these authors in their writings. Like earlier sultans, the Khalji and Tuluks, monarchs appointed military commanders as governors. They were having military commanders. They have appointed them as the governors of their territory, various territories, according to the size, maybe small territory or bigger territory. And these lands were called as Ikta. Whatever land was given into the responsibility of these military commanders, and these small holdings, small lands were called as Ikta. And their holders was called as Iktadar. The one who is in charge of these small holdings, small land, was called as Iktadar or the Mukti. Mukti. He is the Mukti of that particular land given into his care. The duty of the Muktis was to lead military campaigns and maintain law and order in their Iktas. In exchange of their military services, the Muktis collected the revenue of their assignments as salary. They has to collect the revenues from that particular area as their salary. They also paid their soldiers from these revenues. Control over these Muktis was most effective if their office was not inheritable and if they were assigned Iktas for a short period of time before being shifted. And this harsh condition of service were rigorously imposed during the reign of Awladdin Khalji and Muhammad Tuluk. Accountants were appointed by the state to check the accounts of revenue collected by these Muktis. There were accountants appointed by the state to check the revenue or to check the accounts where the revenue was collected by these Muktis. Is it okay or not? The proper salary was given to the soldiers, or what was happened to the accounts, or any drawbacks. So to check all this, the accountants were appointed. Care was taken that the Mukti collected only the taxes prescribed by the state, and that he kept the required number of soldiers. Everywhere the care was taken. The accountant has to check only assigned tax is collected or not. And as the Delhi Sultan brought the hinterland of the cities under their control, they forced the landed chieftains who were called as Samanta, or they were known as Samanta aristocrats. They forced this rich landlord to accept their authority, under the control of Awladdin Khalji. The state brought the assessment and collection of land revenue under its own control. This Awladdin Khalji, the Sultan ruler, brought all this assessment and collection of land revenue during his ruling under his control. The rights of local chieftains to levy taxes were cancelled. The rights were given to the local chieftain to levy taxes. All these rights were cancelled. All these rights were removed. And they were also forced to pay taxes. All the local chieftains, Gaonkari, the head of the village or the community heads, they were given a right to collect taxes. It was removed. And they too were asked to pay taxes by the Sultan. The Sultan's administrator measured the land and kept careful account. The whole land was measured. Maps were drawn. Plans were drawn of the whole land, of the whole village, or whole land holdings of the Sultan. Some of the old chieftains and landlords served the Sultanate as a revenue collectors and assessors. There were three types of taxes. During this period, there were three types of taxes. One tax was on cultivation called as kharaj. Cultivation, whatever the farmers were cultivating, on that cultivation the tax was pulled, and this was called as kharaj, and amounting to about 50% of the farmers, whatever they produce, 50% of that. Suppose the 100 kg paddy is produced, rice, so from that 50 kg rice or the paddy, whatever the farming produce they have after harvest, was need to be given to the governor or to the king as a tax. Now second is on cattle. The second is on cattle. The first was on the agriculture, that is on farming, on the cultivation. Then the second was on the cattle. And third is on the house tax. Nowadays how we have house tax, it was like that. The first tax was introduced is on the cultivation, on farming. The second was on the cattle, whatever cattle they rear, maybe goat or cow, buffaloes, or the whatever they have the livestock. And the third was on the houses as a house tax. It is important to remember that large part of the subcontinent remained outside the control of Delhi sultans. It was difficult to control distant provinces like Bengal from Delhi, and soon after annexing southern India, the entire region became independent. Even in the Gangetic plain, there were forested areas that Sultanate forces could not penetrate. They could not go to these forested areas. Local chieftains established their rule in these regions. Sometimes rulers like Auladdin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq could force their control in these areas, but only for a short duration, because the local chieftains were having control over these dense forested areas where the Sultanate soldiers also could not go or enter. The Mongols from Afghanistan entered, or the Delhi Sultanate faced their onslaught soon after. Mongol attack on Delhi Sultanate increased during the reign of Auladdin Khalji, and in the early years of Muhammad Tughlaq's rule, this forced the two rulers to mobilize a large standing army in Delhi, which posed a huge administrative challenge for the Sultanate. Let us see how two Sultanate dealt with this attack or the frequent invading forces of Mongols, how they were repelling them. Muhammad Tughlaq's failures, we sometimes forget that for the first time in the history of Sultanate, a Delhi Sultan planned a campaign to capture Mongol territory. Unlike Auladdin's defensive measures, Muhammad Tughlaq's measures were conceived as a part of a military offensive against the Mongols. First time they started attacking the Mongols to capture their territory. Now if you see the Sultanate in the 15th and 16th century, and you take a look again, that is table 1, that map on the textbook, you will notice that after the Tughlaqs, the Said and Lodi dynasties ruled from Delhi and Agra until the year 1526. By then, Jaunpur, Bengal, Malwa, Gujarat, Rajasthan and entire South India had independent rulers who established flourishing states and prosperous capitals. This was also the period which saw the emergence of new rulers or new ruling groups like the Afghans and the Rajputs. Some of the states established in this period were small but powerful and extremely well administered. Sher Shah Sur. This is another example. In the year 1540 to 1545, started his career as a manager of a small territory for his uncle in Bihar. He eventually challenged and defeated a Mughal emperor, Humayun, in the year 1530 to 1540. Then again 1555 to 1556. Sher Shah captured Delhi and established his own dynasty. Although Suri dynasty ruled for only 15 years, that is 1540 to 1555. It introduced an administration that borrowed elements from Awladdin Khalji and made them more efficient. Sher Shah's administration became the model followed by the great emperor Akbar from the year 1556 to 1605, where he consolidated the Mughal emperor.